Imagine sitting on a crowded airplane, ready for a trip home, when suddenly you're told to give up your seat not because of safety or necessity, but because of who you are. Two brothers, Ethan and Kai Nakamura, face exactly this on Flight 152, calm yet deeply resilient. These young men stand their ground against quiet but persistent discrimination from the flight crew and a demanding passenger. What happens when dignity is challenged at 35,000 feet? How far will someone go to protect not just a seat, but their sense of worth? This is not just a story about a seat on a plane. It's about courage, family, and the invisible battles millions face every day. It's about the quiet power of standing tall and speaking calmly, even when the world expects you to move. What happens when a simple phone call triggers an airline-wide shutdown? Can one act of quiet resistance spark change that echoes far beyond the cabin? Join us as we unravel this gripping, emotional journey of two brothers who transform a moment of injustice into a movement for respect and dignity. If you believe in justice and want to hear stories that matter, please like, share, and subscribe. Let's begin. The morning sun filtered softly through the living room window of the Mercer household in downtown Seattle. Ethan Nakamura stood by the kitchen island, carefully pouring 2 glasses of orange juice. His older sister, May, was flipping pancakes with practiced ease, her movements smooth and calm, like the rhythm of a quiet song. Across the room, 17-year-old Kai Nakamura was sitting at the breakfast table, his sketchbook open but momentarily forgotten as he watched Ethan with a mix of admiration and anticipation. It was the kind of morning that felt ordinary, filled with small moments that grounded them before the day's adventure. They were preparing for a flight to New York, a rare chance to visit their grandparents in Portland. The weight of the upcoming journey was tempered by the warmth of family and the smell of syrup and coffee. Ethan glanced at Kai, noting the way his younger brother's eyes sparkled despite the nervous energy that hummed just beneath the surface. "You ready for this?" Ethan asked softly, setting the glasses down. Kai nodded, his hand tightening around the pencil in his lap. "Yeah, I can't wait to see Grandpa's garden. He says the roses are finally blooming." Ethan smiled, the kind of smile that carried years of quiet responsibility. He reached over and ruffled Kai's hair, careful not to disturb his focus too much. "We'll make it a good trip." Together, their mother, May, called from the stove. "Coffee's on. Pancakes in 2 minutes. You boys better build some towers with those pancakes." Her teasing tone broke through the tension, eliciting a small laugh from both brothers. Ethan felt the familiar flutter of nerves in his stomach but pushed it down. This wasn't just a trip, it was a test of patience, dignity, and strength. He had learned to carry himself with quiet confidence, a lesson drilled home by their father, Judge Robert Nakamura, a man whose calm authority seemed to fill every room he entered. Their father's advice echoed in Ethan's mind: stand tall, speak up calmly, protect your dignity. As they finished breakfast, the family moved with practiced ease toward the car. The drive to SeaTac Airport was filled with the usual mix of chatter and quiet moments, the city passing by in a blur of glass buildings and early commuters. Ethan quizzed Kai on trivia about Seattle's history, while Kai fired back with baseball stats, their playful rivalry softening the weight of what was to come. At the airport, the cool rush of air greeted them as they stepped under the glass canopy of the terminal. Ethan hoisted Kai's backpack out of the car with a steady hand. They walked inside together, boarding passes in hand. Ready for what lay ahead, the hum of the airport buzzed around them. a chaotic symphony of footsteps, voices, and rolling luggage. Ethan felt the familiar knot in his chest but kept his face steady. This was their space now, and they intended to claim it with dignity, passing through security. Their mother's words echoed, "Keep calm under pressure." Ethan slid through the scanner. Shoes off, laptop in hand, the familiar beeps and whistles barely registering. He glanced at Kai, who gave a nervous but determined nod. At gate 12, the boarding call came. They moved forward, their footsteps steady. Ethan took the window seat, Kai next to him, the space between them tight and reassuring. The plane, a sleek silver craft, waited patiently on the tarmac. Its engines humming softly in the early morning light. The cabin was beginning to fill. Business travelers settled into leather seats, laptops glowing, phones buzzing, families chatted softly, and the occasional baby fussed in the distance. Ethan took a deep breath and placed a steadying hand on Kai's shoulder. "Here's to a smooth flight," he whispered. Kai smiled, flipping open his sketchbook to a blank page. The journey was more than just miles in the air. It was about standing together, ready for whatever came next. For a while, the flight seemed like any other. The engines roared as they took off, the city shrinking beneath them. Ethan leaned back, watching clouds drift by while Kai quietly sketched the plane's sleek fuselage from memory. But beneath the calm, Ethan felt the tension build. The thought of his father's words, "Stand tall, speak up calmly," was a talisman against the invisible pressures waiting ahead. Minutes later, the lead flight attendant approached. Gloria Turner, a woman with a sharp smile and an air of authority, greeted them with polite but distant eyes. Ethan noticed the tightness in her posture, a tension that didn't belong to the hum of the engines. "Mr. Nakamura, Mr. Nakamura." Gloria began softly as she reached their row. Her voice was calm, but carried a weight. "I'm sorry to inform you that we have a passenger with a medical requirement who needs an aisle seat in this cabin. Unfortunately, you two are the only available passengers in business class at the moment." Ethan's heart sank. He glanced past her to the empty seats in rows 14 and 15. Other passengers were seated there, older travelers, professionals, none Kai's age or Ethan's. With measured calm, Ethan replied, "We paid for these seats. We are not moving." Gloria's smile flickered. "Sir, I understand, but this is airline policy." The word policy hit the cabin like a sudden chill. Kai's grip on his sketchbook tightened, and Ethan felt a familiar tightening in his chest. Around them, eyes flicked toward the exchange. Some passengers shifted uneasily. Others watched with quiet curiosity. Ethan leaned forward, voice steady but firm, then asked one of the other passengers. Gloria's expression tightened, but before she could respond, Ethan's phone slid smoothly from his pocket. His thumb hovered over a contact, then tapped. "Dad," he whispered to Kai. "I'm calling, Dad." Kai nodded, eyes wide but trusting. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. "Judge Nakamura speaking," came the steady, calm voice over the line. Ethan swallowed, then spoke with quiet determination. "We need help." From the back of the cabin, Ethan noticed Jasmine, a younger flight attendant, watching with a conflicted expression caught between duty and empathy. Suddenly, the cabin lights dimmed fractionally, and the intercom crackled to life. "This is Captain Louis Mercer. We are experiencing a brief ground delay due to an administrative matter. Thank you for your patience." Gloria's posture slackened, the professional mask cracking just slightly. Passengers exchanged glances, whispers stirring like a rising tide. Ethan sank back into his seat. Kai exhaled in relief beside him. The quiet power of one phone call had rippled beyond their row, beyond the plane itself. The weight of dignity, once threatened, was being reclaimed. The engines hummed steadily, but now the sound carried something new, the pulse of justice slowly awakening. The cabin settled into an uneasy quiet. Passengers shifted in their seats, eyes flicking toward Ethan and Kai. The subtle hum of conversation was replaced by a faint murmur of curiosity and tension. Gloria Turner stood near the front, her crisp uniform immaculate, but her shoulders visibly weighed down by the unfolding situation. Ethan glanced at his younger brother, who was still gripping his sketchbook tightly. Kai's usual calm was fraying at the edges, and Ethan felt the heavy responsibility settle even more firmly on his shoulders. This wasn't just about 2 seats anymore. It was about standing firm against a tide that threatened to wash away their dignity. The intercom clicked again, and Captain Mercer's voice cut through the cabin with steady authority. "Ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you for your patience during this delay. I understand there has been some confusion regarding seat assignments. Please be assured, no passenger will be moved from their assigned seat without cause." Ethan let out a slow breath, feeling a small measure of relief, but the fight was far from over. Minutes later, Gloria returned, her expression carefully neutral. "Mr. Nakamura, Mrs. Caldwell from 18A has expressed discomfort with your seats. She insists that she paid a premium for first class and requests that you relocate." Ethan's jaw tightened. He looked toward the aisle seat across from them, where Mrs. Caldwell, a woman in her late 50s with perfectly coiffed hair and an air of entitlement, sat tapping her nails against the armrest. Her gaze was cold and unyielding. Kai's pencil hovered uncertainly above his sketchbook. Ethan placed a steadying hand on his brother's shoulder. "We're not moving," he said calmly but firmly. Gloria's eyes flickered toward the flight attendant, Jasmine, who gave a small sympathetic nod. It was clear some of the crew were caught in the crossfire of this unfolding conflict. Mrs. Caldwell's voice rose, sharp and imperious. "Children do not belong in first class. Perhaps you should be moved to the rear of the plane where you belong." A hush fell over the cabin. The weight of her words pressed heavily in the air. Kai's eyes welled with tears, and Ethan felt a familiar fire rise inside him, one tempered by the resolve to keep their composure. "That's not fair," Kai whispered, voice cracking. Ethan squeezed his brother's shoulder gently. "I've got you," he said softly. He stood, towering over both Gloria and Mrs. Caldwell. His voice was steady and clear. "This is not about comfort. This is about discrimination. We paid for these seats. So did she. We are not moving." Whispers rippled through the cabin. A man 2 rows back closed his newspaper and leaned forward, his eyes filled with concern. Gloria stepped closer, voice cautious. "Sir, please do not escalate." Ethan met her gaze, unwavering. "Or what?" Mrs. Caldwell scoffed. "I will call corporate. This is unacceptable." Before she could reach for her phone, Ethan calmly said, "Go ahead. I want this in writing." The cabin held its breath as Mrs. Caldwell tapped furiously on her screen. The airline's automated reply appeared, "Please comply with the crew's request." Ethan took the phone gently from her hand and showed the screen to the cabin. "That is incorrect policy," he said quietly. "Captain Mercer announced no one is to be moved without explicit approval. You are spreading misinformation." Kai bent down to retrieve a fallen pencil. Ethan knelt beside him. brushing damp strands from his brother's face. "You okay?" he murmured. Kai nodded, voice barely a whisper. "I'm scared." Ethan swallowed the lump in his throat. Across the aisle, a woman in row 14 smiled encouragingly, and the businessman stood. "These boys are right. If the captain says no one moves, that is final." Florence, one of the other flight attendants passing by, took a deep breath and exchanged a look with Jasmine. The crew was divided, caught between enforcing policy and empathy. The cabin lights dimmed as the in-flight service demonstration began. Ethan sat upright, feeling a surge of gratitude for the quiet support from the passengers. Kai leaned into him. "Thanks, Ethan." Ethan smiled. "Always." Captain Mercer's voice returned through the intercom, firm and clear. "Ladies and gentlemen, please remain calm. The airline's ethics protocol is in effect. No passenger shall be moved without my direct approval. We will proceed as planned." Applause rippled through the cabin. Gloria exhaled, her tension visibly easing, and Jasmine allowed herself a small, hopeful smile. Ethan settled back, the exhaustion washing over him like a wave. Kai pressed his forehead against Ethan's arm, tears finally breaking free. "You did great." Ethan whispered, "I am proud of you." Kai sniffled. "I was scared." "Me too," Ethan admitted, but we stood firm. A flight attendant pushed a beverage cart past them. A man nearby offered 2 bottles of water. Jasmine stopped, handing the brothers each a glass. "On the house," she said softly. The chill of the water soothed their throats as the cabin's atmosphere shifted. Quiet whispers of respect and admiration filled the space. Kai set his sketchbook on his lap and opened to a fresh page, capturing the cabin scene, the brothers standing strong, the shifting tensions, the compassionate glances. Ethan closed his eyes, pride swelling quietly in his chest. Beyond the window, the wingtip sliced through the clouds. The sky stretched endless and blue, a reminder that no matter the turbulence below, they could rise. Yet, inside Ethan's mind, the words his father had spoken at breakfast echoed: "Stand tall. Speak calmly. Protect your dignity." He felt the weight of that promise settle over him. The tension was not yet gone. It lingered in the eyes of Mrs. Caldwell, in the tightness of Gloria's posture, and in the anxious tapping of Kai's pencil. The fight was far from over. Later, as the afternoon sun slanted through the cabin windows and painted golden rectangles on the seats, Gloria approached again. Her voice was quieter now, tinged with a hint of remorse. "There is a new issue," she said, eyes flickering between the brothers. "Mrs. Caldwell's service animal requires additional space and must remain in this cabin. The operations team has requested one of you move again, this time to row 19, economy class, narrower seats, less leg room, less dignity." Ethan's chest tightened as Kai's hands clenched the armrests. The repeated demands felt like a slow erosion of their rights. "We have already spoken to the captain," Ethan said quietly but firmly. "We will stay in our seats." Gloria's gaze dropped. "I understand, but I have been instructed to enforce this." Kai reached out, squeezing Ethan's shoulder. "We'll handle this," he whispered, though his own voice was fragile. Gloria offered a thin smile, one that didn't reach her eyes. "If you want, I can arrange a meeting with the purser." Ethan closed his eyes for a moment. "No, thank you. We will stay here." The cabin watched in quiet sympathy. A businessman paused his laptop. An elderly woman folded her hands. Jasmine watched from the galley, her jaw tight, a silent advocate in the background. The brothers returned to their seats, the cabin's rhythm slowing again. The hum of the engines became a reminder not just of movement, but of resistance. Ethan returned to his book, Kai to his sketches, but neither could truly concentrate. Every glance toward the aisle was a reminder of the precariousness of their space. Florence's footsteps drew near again, voice edged with frustration. "The animal must be in this section." She said, "It is airline policy." Ethan closed his book deliberately and rose once more. Kai at his side, with quiet strength, Ethan said, "Policy cannot be applied selectively." The captain made a clear announcement, "No one moves." Florence hesitated, lips pressed tight. She glanced at her tablet and away again. Finally, she nodded. "I will report back." Relief flooded Ethan as Gloria walked away. Shoulders slumping, Kai exhaled next to him. "That shouldn't have happened." Ethan rubbed his brother's back. "I know, but they're trying to push us. We can't give in." Kai swallowed hard. "What if they ask again?" Ethan looked out at the sky beyond the window. "Then we speak calmly, firmly, just like Dad taught us." Kai nodded, eyes bright but hands trembling. Ethan slid an arm around his brother. "I've got you." Jasmine caught Ethan's eye and offered a small nod, a quiet promise they were not alone. The cabin hummed softly, but inside, the brothers' resolve burned steady and bright. The hum of the engines was a steady undercurrent beneath the murmur of voices. Ethan sat back in his seat, the leather creaking softly beneath him. His gaze drifted to the window, where patches of cloud drifted lazily beneath the wing. But his mind was far from the peaceful sky outside. It was tangled in a web of unspoken battles, ones that no passenger list could capture. Kai was sketching quietly beside him, pencil moving with tentative strokes. Ethan watched the younger boy's hands, so familiar yet fragile under pressure. Every line Kai drew seemed like a small rebellion against the harshness that had encroached on their flight. Their cabin neighbors were a mix of curious eyes and sympathetic smiles. Yet behind every glance was a question Ethan could not answer. How much longer would they be forced to endure this fight? How long could dignity survive in a space meant for luxury but tainted by prejudice? The flight attendants moved with practiced efficiency, masks of professionalism hiding the undercurrent of discomfort. Gloria's posture had softened since the last confrontation, but Ethan knew the cracks beneath her facade were deeper than she let on. The captain's voice echoed again through the intercom, steady and reassuring. "We appreciate your patience as we work through these matters. We will continue to prioritize the comfort and safety of all passengers." Ethan exhaled, but the tightness in his chest lingered. His mind wandered back to the morning, to the quiet conversation with his father before the flight. Remember, his father had said, "Voice calm but firm. Strength is not loud. It is steady, it is calm in the face of chaos." Ethan had nodded, absorbing the weight of that wisdom. Now it felt like a lifeline. Suddenly, a commotion near the rear galley drew attention. A flight attendant whispered urgently to the purser. Gloria's eyes flicked toward the sound, her lips pressing together. Ethan felt a shift in the atmosphere. Something was about to change. Jasmine appeared beside him, lowering her voice. "There's been a complaint filed against you, Mr. Nakamura. A passenger says you caused a disturbance." Ethan's heart sank. The words stung more than he expected. He had stayed calm, but now he was being painted as the problem. Kai looked up, sensing the change. "What does that mean?" Ethan shook his head, voice steady despite the turmoil inside. "It means we have to stay strong, no matter what." Gloria approached with a tablet in hand, her expression serious but not unkind. Sir, the operations team has asked me to inform you that you must meet with the purser to discuss this complaint. Ethan exchanged a glance with Kai. The younger brother's face was pale but resolute. Led me to it, Ethan said calmly, as they walked down the narrow aisle. Whispers followed them like shadows. Some eyes were filled with solidarity, others with judgment. The purser's office was cramped, the glow of a small desk lamp casting harsh light on a stack of forms. A middle-aged woman with sharp eyes looked up as they entered. "Mr. Nakamura," she began, voice clipped but professional. "There has been a complaint of disruptive behavior filed by Mrs. Caldwell. We need to resolve this swiftly." Ethan folded his hands calmly. There was no disruption beyond a refusal to move from our assigned seats, which is our right. The captain confirmed this. The purser's lips tightened. "Mrs. Caldwell is insistent, and the airline must consider all complaints seriously." Kai's voice broke the tension. "She called us children and said we didn't belong in first class." The purser's gaze flicked between the brothers. "I understand this is difficult, but we must keep the peace." Ethan's eyes narrowed slightly, but he maintained his composure. Peace built on discrimination is no peace at all. The woman hesitated, then sighed. "I will escalate this to the operations center. Meanwhile, please return to your seats." Ethan nodded. Signaling to Kai, as they turned to leave, he whispered, "Stay calm," back at their seats. The weight of the encounter settled heavily. Kai looked up, worry etched on his young face. "Do you think they will try again?" he asked softly. "They will," Ethan replied, "but we will be ready." The hours crept by with the steady rhythm of the flight. Passengers ate meals, watched movies, and murmured softly in the background. But Ethan and Kai sat poised, alert to every movement, every glance. Ethan's thoughts returned to their family history, the long line of resilience and quiet strength that had carried them through generations. His grandfather had faced prejudice with silent dignity. His father had passed down lessons of endurance. Now it was Ethan's turn. The next moment shattered the fragile calm. Gloria approached, her face pale. "Mr. Nakamura, there is an urgent call from corporate. The airline's CEO wishes to speak with you directly." Ethan's pulse quickened. A call from the CEO was unexpected and unnerving. He nodded and followed Gloria to a quiet corner near the galley. The call came through on a small headset. The voice on the other end was calm but unmistakably authoritative. "Mr. Nakamura, I am David Halstead, CEO of Altura Airlines. I have been briefed on the situation on board Flight 152. I want to assure you that we do not condone discrimination of any kind." Ethan felt a flicker of hope. "Thank you, sir. We only want to be treated with respect." Halstead continued, "I am personally overseeing the response to this incident. The crew has been instructed to stand down on any further seat. Relocation requests until we have reviewed the facts." Ethan exhaled slowly. "That is appreciated." The CEO's voice softened. "I understand the weight of these experiences. You and your brother have my support." Tears pricked Ethan's eyes. It was more than words, it was a promise that things could change. He shared the news with Kai, whose relief was immediate but tempered by exhaustion. "Maybe this fight is worth it." Kai whispered, "It has to be." Ethan replied. As the plane cruised over endless fields and cities, the brothers settled into a fragile peace. The journey was far from over, but for now, their dignity remained intact. The cabin lights dimmed again as passengers prepared for landing. Ethan glanced once more at Kai's sketchbook, a drawing of the cabin scene with them standing firm. A testament to resilience. He wondered how many others on board had felt the invisible battles, the quiet strength needed to face prejudice. His father's words echoed again. Strength is steady, calm in chaos, and Ethan knew that no matter what came next, they would face it together. The cabin settled into an uneasy quiet. The faint hum of the engines was almost comforting, a reminder that the plane was still moving forward, even if the tension inside felt frozen in place. Ethan sat still, his hands folded in his lap, but inside a storm brewed a mix of fatigue, frustration, and that familiar knot of responsibility. Kai leaned back in his seat, eyes tracing the patterns of light flickering on the overhead bins. His sketchbook lay closed on the tray table, his pencil resting beside it. He seemed smaller somehow, as if the events of the day had drained some of his usual spark. Ethan caught himself watching his brother and felt a surge of protectiveness. This fight was not just about seats or airline policies. It was about something deeper, something far more fragile. The flight attendants moved through the cabin with careful steps. Gloria's smile was measured now, worn thin by the day's strain. Jasmine offered quiet nods of encouragement as she passed by the brothers. The crew were caught between duty and discomfort, their faces reflecting the unspoken turmoil. Ethan's mind replayed the moments from earlier, the confrontation with Mrs. Caldwell, the captain's firm announcements, the surge of support from some passengers. Yet, the uncertainty lingered like a shadow. He glanced down at his watch. Hours still remained before they would land in New York. Hours to wait. Hours to hold on. His thoughts drifted to his father's call earlier. Judge Robert Nakamura's steady voice had been a balm, a reminder of strength and quiet resolve. But even strength could waver. Ethan felt it now, the weight of carrying not only his own dignity but his brother's. The seatbelt sign flicked on, signaling the upcoming descent. The cabin lights brightened and the murmurs of passengers stirred. But Ethan and Kai remained tethered to their own silent dialogue. Kai finally broke the stillness. "Ethan, do you think it will get better?" After this, Ethan looked at his brother, searching the eyes that had once been so full of certainty. Now they held a question no one wanted to answer. "I want to believe it will," Ethan said softly. "But sometimes change takes time. It's not just about this flight, or even this airline. It's about the world we live in. People need to see each other's worth before things truly shift." Kai nodded slowly, biting his lip. "It just feels so unfair. Why should we have to prove we belong here just because of who we are?" Ethan's chest tightened. The question was a quiet echo of years of experience, of classrooms and courts, of whispered judgments and cold stares, the weight of history pressing down. He reached out, squeezing Kai's hand. "Because we matter, and we have to remind the world of that every chance we get, even when it's hard." The younger boy's eyes shimmered with tears, but a flicker of resolve returned. The intercom crackled. Captain Mercer's voice filled the cabin once more. "Ladies and gentlemen, we will begin our final descent shortly. Thank you for your continued patience and understanding. Your safety and dignity remain our priority." Ethan exhaled, a breath he didn't realize he was holding. The flight attendants began preparations for landing. Gloria stopped by their row, offering a small, genuine smile. "You two have handled this with remarkable grace," she said quietly. "I'm sorry for what you've had to endure." Ethan nodded. "Thank you." Gloria, That means a lot. Kai opened his sketchbook and began to draw again. Ethan watched the lines take shape figures standing side by side, faces calm and unyielding beneath a glow of cabin lights. The artistry was a balm for both of them, a way to reclaim their story on their own terms. As the plane descended through clouds, a sudden tremor of anxiety rippled through Ethan. He thought about what might come next, the debriefings, the reports, the questions they would have to answer, the media attention that would surely follow, the toll it might take on their family. He glanced at Kai, who caught his gaze and gave a small nod, as if sensing the same fears. "We'll face it," Ethan said, voice steady. Together, the runway lights stretched out beneath them, bright and welcoming. The landing was smooth. The plane rolled along the taxiway, engines humming steadily. Passengers began to stir, gathering belongings and stretching limbs. But for Ethan and Kai, the journey was far from over. As the cabin doors opened and the flow of disembarking passengers began, a new chapter awaited one of reckoning, resilience, and hope. They stood side by side, brothers united by more than blood, united by a shared courage that refused to be dimmed. And as they stepped into the bustling terminal of New York's JFK Airport, their eyes met the faces of family waiting a circle of love ready to catch them when the fight felt heavy. Ethan felt the steady strength of his father's presence beside him, the quiet support of their mother, and the warmth of grandparents whose pride shone like a beacon. This was their homecoming, not just to a city, but to the promise that dignity, once claimed, is a force no one can take away. The terminal buzzed with energy as passengers disembarked, their footsteps echoing off the polished floors. Ethan and Kai walked steadily beside their parents and grandparents, the welcome banner fluttering gently in the air conditioning. The crowd was a mixture of curious strangers, family friends, and a few familiar faces from the neighborhood. But for Ethan, the cacophony of the airport seemed to fade beneath the steady thrum of his own thoughts. Every step felt heavy with the weight of what had just happened. The battle over seats was over, but the fight for dignity was far from done. Ethan's mind replayed the cabin moments, the tight smiles, the whispered support, the lingering looks of discomfort from some passengers. It all felt surreal, like a play whose final act was still unwritten. Kai, clutching his sketchbook close, looked up at Ethan with a quiet question in his eyes. "Do you think this will change anything?" Really, Ethan stopped and looked out at the throng of travelers streaming through the terminal. "I want to believe it will," he said slowly. "But change doesn't come from a single act. It comes from every small voice added together. What we did today was one voice, a loud one? Yes, but there are many more that need to be heard." Kai considered this, then nodded thoughtfully. "So we keep speaking up." "Yes, even when it feels like no one is listening." Ethan's voice was firm, but his eyes softened as he squeezed his brother's shoulder. Their family paused near a quiet corner where a few reporters and camera crews had gathered. The moment was inevitable. Ethan braced himself as a young journalist stepped forward, microphone in hand. "Mr. Nakamura," she began, voice steady. "Can you tell us what happened on Flight 742 today? What compelled you and your brother to stand your ground against the airline's requests?" Ethan took a breath, glanced at Kai, who gave a small encouraging smile, and nodded. It was about more than seats. It was about respect and dignity. For too long, people like us have been asked to move, to shrink, to be less than. Today, we decided enough was enough. We stood tall, not just for ourselves, But for anyone who has ever been told they don't belong, the reporter's eyes widened, impressed by the quiet strength in his words. And what would you say to others who face similar discrimination but are afraid to speak up? Ethan's gaze swept the crowd. I would say this: your voice matters, your dignity matters. It may not always be easy, and there will be moments of fear, but standing up calmly and firmly changes the conversation. It starts with you. As he spoke, Kai watched his brother's calm resolve with growing admiration. He had seen Ethan's internal struggle the nights of doubt, the hours spent rehearsing what to say. But today, all that had crystallized into something powerful. A soft murmur rippled through the gathered crowd, and Ethan realized the story was already spreading. Social media feeds lit up with posts from passengers who had witnessed the stand, messages of support from communities far beyond the airport walls. Later, at the family's rented car, the car's quiet interior was filled with the gentle rustle of Leo's sketchbook flipping open again. Kai traced his fingers over the drawings, each one a vivid recollection of the flight's emotional landscape. "Look," Kai said softly. "This one is when Florence apologized. She looked like she carried the weight of 1,000 silent moments." Ethan smiled, reaching out to tuck a stray lock of hair behind Kai's ear. "She's human. We all are. And part of change is helping others see that too." The drive to their hotel was filled with quiet conversations and comfortable silences. Outside, the cityscape of New York stretched out, lights flickering like distant stars. Ethan's thoughts wandered to the work-ahead interviews, meetings, statements. The weight of leadership was something he had always carried, but never quite like this. That night, in the quiet of his hotel room, Ethan sat by the window, city lights casting soft patterns on the walls. His phone buzzed repeatedly, messages of support, calls from civil rights groups, even a few from airline executives wanting to talk. But beneath it all was a familiar question, a whisper from within that refused to be silenced. Had he done enough? Was standing up this way enough to shift the tides of a system so deeply entrenched in bias? His mind drifted back to his father's words from the morning. Progress isn't a single step. It's every step we take together every day. Ethan reached for his phone, scrolling through the photos Kai had taken during the flight, the moments of tension, the quiet exchanges of empathy, the final applause. They were more than images. They were reminders of the power in presence. He typed a message to his father. "We made a start, but I feel the road ahead is still long." His father's reply was swift, a simple phrase that lifted Ethan's spirits, one step at a time. The next morning, Ethan woke early. The city outside was already alive with movement. He sat at the small desk in his hotel room, opening his laptop to begin drafting a statement, a call for systemic reform within the airline industry, a plea for accountability, and a reminder that dignity must be at the heart of every policy. Kai sat in the bed, sketchbook open, pencils scattered around. "Do you think people will listen?" he asked, eyes bright with hope. Ethan looked up, meeting his brother's gaze. "They will if we keep telling the story, if we make it real, if we remind them what it means to be human." Kai smiled, picking up a pencil and beginning a new sketch, two figures standing firm beneath a glow of light. Outside, the city pulsed with possibility. Inside, two brothers prepared to carry the weight of their journey forward. The hotel room was quiet except for the soft scratch of Kai's pencil against paper. Ethan sat nearby, fingers poised over the keyboard, trying to find the words that would capture everything they had endured and everything they hoped to change. His mind was a storm of thoughts, memories, and questions. But his voice, when he spoke aloud, was measured and calm. Sometimes the hardest part isn't standing up, it's knowing what comes after, Ethan murmured. Kai looked up from his sketchbook, eyes searching. What do you mean? Ethan sighed. The flight was only one moment, but the fight for respect and equality, that's a lifetime. When you speak out, people listen or they pretend to. Some will support you. Others will push back harder than ever. Sometimes, the silence from those who should stand with you is the heaviest weight of all. Kai absorbed that quietly. He had seen the tension on the faces of the passengers, the fleeting glances from crew members, and the way Florence's smile had faltered. He had felt the atmosphere shift when Mrs. Caldwell raised her voice. He knew the journey ahead was more than just a flight or a single confrontation. "Do you ever feel scared?" Kai asked. Voice low, Ethan's gaze softened. "All the time. Fear doesn't disappear just because you're strong. It lives beside courage. But courage is choosing to act anyway. To protect what matters most, your dignity, your family, your values." Kai nodded slowly, the pencil tapping softly on the page again. "I want to be brave like you. You already are." Ethan said with a small smile, "Bravery comes in many forms. Sometimes it's quiet, sometimes it's loud. And sometimes it's just showing up every day, ready to face whatever comes." The room filled with a comfortable silence. Outside the window, the city was waking up, streets bustling with early morning life. The hum of cars, distant sirens. It was a world full of noise and movement. But inside here, time seemed to slow, holding a space for reflection. Ethan finally returned to his laptop, fingers flowing over the keys with renewed purpose. The statement he was crafting wasn't just for the airline or the media. It was for everyone who had ever felt invisible, for those whose voices had been pushed aside. It was a call for accountability and empathy, for policies rooted in humanity rather than bureaucracy. His phone buzzed, breaking the stillness. A message from their mother appeared. "Remember to breathe. We are proud of you both." He smiled and replied with a simple heart emoji. Family was their anchor, their source of strength in moments of doubt. Kai stretched and flipped his sketchbook around to show Ethan the latest drawing, a detailed portrait of Captain Mercer. His kind eyes reflected perfectly in pencil strokes. He was different. Kai said, like he really cared. Ethan nodded thoughtfully. Not everyone understands the weight they carry. A leader's job is not just to command, but to protect. Captain Mercer did that today. As the hours passed, phone calls and emails filled Ethan's inbox, advocates wanting to join the conversation, passengers sharing their own stories, journalists requesting interviews. The ripple effect of their stand was spreading faster than either brother had imagined. But with every new message came the weight of responsibility. Could they live up to the expectations? Could they turn this moment into lasting change? Ethan closed his eyes briefly and pictured his father's steady face. The judge had often reminded them that justice was not a destination, but a continuous journey. Each step forward built the foundation for the next. Kai looked up again, breaking Ethan's reverie. What if people forget? Ethan smiled gently. They won't, not if we keep telling the story, not if we keep standing tall and speaking calmly. The brothers shared a quiet laugh, the tension easing just a little. Later that afternoon, they joined their family for a walk through Central Park. The trees swayed gently in the breeze, leaves whispering stories older than any of them. It was a moment of peace, a reminder of the world beyond the airport and the news cycles. Grandma took Kai's hand, her eyes shining with pride. "You boys have done something beautiful. You've shown what dignity looks like." Grandpa nodded in agreement, and that courage is contagious. Ethan felt a warmth in his chest. The weight of the day was still there, but so was hope, a fragile, persistent hope that together they could build something better. As the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the paths, Ethan thought about the journey ahead, the challenges they would face, the battles to be fought. But for now, in this moment, surrounded by family and the promise of tomorrow, he allowed himself to breathe. The flight had been more than a test of patience or policy. It had been a testament to the power of quiet strength, to the unyielding spirit of two brothers who refused to be moved. And as they walked through the fading light, Ethan knew the true journey was only just beginning. The morning light filtered softly through the hotel curtains, casting long shadows across the room where Ethan and Kai sat side by side. The peacefulness of dawn was deceptive. Beneath the calm exterior, both brothers wrestled with the lingering echoes of the previous day's confrontation. The flight had ended, but the battle was far from over. Ethan tapped his fingers against the armrest, his mind racing with questions and doubts. He had always been the steady one, the calm voice in the storm, but even he was beginning to feel the weight of the responsibility they had taken on. What would come next? How deep did the resistance go? Was this isolated or part of something larger, more systemic? Kai looked up from his sketchbook, eyes bright but shadowed with uncertainty. Do you think they really understood the crew? The passengers? Everyone? His voice was quiet but carried the tremor of worry. Ethan nodded slowly. Some did, some didn't. Florence apologized, and Captain Mercer showed real leadership. But not everyone will change overnight. Change is messy. It's slow, and often uncomfortable. Kai tapped his pencil thoughtfully against the paper. I can't stop thinking about Mrs. Caldwell, how she acted like we didn't belong, like we were intruders in our own seats. That's the hard part. Ethan said, "It's not just about seats or rules. It's about who feels entitled and who is made to feel invisible. That's where the real fight lies." The brothers had spent hours after the flight discussing what had happened, going over every detail, every word spoken, every glance exchanged. They knew the story was bigger than them now. It had touched something raw in the airline, in the passengers, and in themselves. Ethan's phone buzzed again. Another email from the airline's corporate office requesting a statement. Another message from a civil rights group offering support. Another note from a journalist eager for an interview. Each message was a reminder that their private struggle had become public, that their voices carried far beyond the confines of Flight 742. But with that visibility came pressure. Would they be able to keep their composure? Would their story be told with the respect and nuance it deserved? Ethan felt the tension knot in his chest. Kai caught his brother's eye and gave a reassuring smile. "We're in this together. We'll figure it out." Ethan returned the smile. Drawing strength from Kai's youthful optimism, we have to, for ourselves, for everyone who faces this every day. Later that morning, they met with a small group of advocates and legal advisors in a quiet conference room at the hotel. The walls were lined with framed photographs of past civil rights leaders, their faces a reminder of the long history of struggle and perseverance. The group discussed the airline's policies, the chain of commands that had led to the repeated demands for Ethan and Kai to move seats, and the systemic issues embedded in corporate culture. One advisor, A woman named Carla, with sharp eyes and a measured voice, spoke of implicit bias and the importance of training and accountability. She emphasized that change required both policy shifts and cultural transformation. Ethan listened intently, aware that this was the start of a long process. The flight had ignited a spark, but it was up to them and others to fan it into lasting change. Kai, sitting beside him, sketched quietly, capturing the room's energy, the mix of determination, frustration, and hope. After the meeting, the brothers took a moment outside in the crisp city air. The noise of the streets felt distant, a world apart from the intense conversations within. Kai looked up at Ethan. "Do you think we'll be okay? That people will really listen?" Ethan considered the question carefully. "I hope so. But more than that, I believe they have to. The alternative is to let this continue, to let people like Mrs. Caldwell think they can push others around with no consequences." Kai nodded solemnly. "It's exhausting." "It is." Ethan agreed. But so is living with the quiet pain of being invisible or excluded. Sometimes you have to be the voice that breaks the silence, even when it's hard. That evening, as they prepared for the flight home, the brothers found themselves back at the airport, the bustle of travelers, the announcements over the intercom, the smell of coffee and paperbacks. It all felt familiar, yet charged with new meaning. At the gate, Ethan glanced at Kai's sketchbook once more. The pages were filled with images that told their story: the stern faces of flight attendants, the commanding presence of Captain Mercer, the small fort of pillows they had built in row 16. Kai smiled softly. "This is more than just pictures now. It's our truth." Ethan reached over, squeezing his brother's shoulder, and our responsibility boarding the plane again. The atmosphere was different. There was a quiet respect in the air, an unspoken acknowledgement of what had happened and what still needed to happen. Florence greeted them at the door, her smile warmer and less guarded. Jasmine stood nearby, eyes bright with a mixture of relief and resolve. The flight was smooth, the hum of engines a steady backdrop to their thoughts. Ethan reflected on the words their father had shared, the lessons of dignity and calm strength. He thought about the countless others who had been asked to move, to shrink, to disappear. He thought about the silent battles waged every day in airports, offices, and homes, and he knew that their fight was part of a larger story, one that demanded courage, not just from him and Kai, but from everyone willing to stand tall and speak calmly. As the plane touched down in their hometown, the brothers felt a renewed sense of purpose. They were more than passengers. They were advocates, storytellers, and bearers of a legacy that stretched far beyond any flight. The journey ahead would be challenging, filled with moments of doubt and confrontation, but they were ready. Together, they would face whatever came next with the quiet power of truth and the unwavering strength of family. The terminal lights glowed softly around them as they gathered their bags, the weight of their experience settling into a steady resolve. Ethan caught Kai's eye and smiled, ready for the next chapter. Kai grinned back, confidence shining. Always. The city streets buzzed with life as Ethan and Kai stepped out of the airport terminal. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows on the pavement and warmed their faces with a gentle glow. For a moment, the chaos of travel and confrontation felt distant, replaced by the familiar rhythm of home. Ethan adjusted the strap of his backpack and glanced over at Kai, whose sketchbook was tucked securely under his arm. The drawings inside were more than just pictures now. They were a record of resilience, of standing up quietly but firmly in the face of injustice. Kai's eyes sparkled with a mixture of relief and determination. Do you think anyone will actually listen? Not just hear us, but really listen. Ethan considered the question carefully. Some will. Others need to be shown. Reminded. This is just the beginning. We made a noise they couldn't ignore, but lasting change takes time. It requires people willing to keep pushing, to keep speaking, even when it feels like no one is listening. The brothers walked through the busy streets, their steps falling in sync as they navigated through the crowd. Cars honked, vendors called out their wares, and children played in a nearby park. The city moved on, unaware of the quiet revolution unfolding in the lives of two young men. That evening, back at their family home, the atmosphere was warm and welcoming. Their mother, Ann Nakamura, was in the kitchen preparing dinner. The smell of roasted vegetables and fresh herbs filled the air. The dining table was set with care. A small vase of flowers at the center. Dad, Judge Robert Nakamura, sat in his study, his robes neatly folded on the chair beside him. When Ethan and Kai entered, he greeted them with a calm smile. Welcome home. Boys, I've been following everything closely. Ethan felt the familiar comfort of his father's presence, the steady foundation in a world that often felt unsteady. It's been a long day, he said. Voice soft, Kai nodded, pulling out his sketchbook to show their parents the latest drawings. The pages told the story of their ordeal, the tense moments in the cabin, the small acts of kindness from Jasmine, the captain's firm stance, and the growing solidarity among passengers. Anne traced her fingers over the pencil lines with quiet admiration. These are beautiful. Kai, you captured so much emotion here. Kai smiled shyly. It helped me understand what we went through. It's like telling the story with pictures. Judge Nakamura leaned forward, his expression serious but full of pride. Your actions remind me why the law exists, not just to enforce rules, but to protect dignity. The courage you showed is the kind that changes minds and hearts. Later that night, as the city lights flickered outside their windows, Ethan found himself alone in the quiet of his room. The adrenaline from the flight had faded, leaving space for reflection. He sat at his desk, opening his laptop to check the news. Reports about Flight 742 were already circulating. Headlines praised the brothers' calm defiance and the airline's swift response. Social media buzzed with stories of passengers who had witnessed the event firsthand. Many expressed solidarity, while others debated the deeper issues the story raised. Ethan scrolled through comments, some supportive, some dismissive. The divide was clear, a reflection of the wider societal tensions they had confronted on the plane. He closed the laptop and leaned back in his chair, his mind wrestling with conflicting feelings. The victory was real, but it was also fragile. Change was never guaranteed, and resistance could appear in unexpected forms. In that quiet moment, he thought about Kai, about their family, about the countless others who faced similar battles in silence every day. He whispered the words their father had said that morning. Stand tall, speak up calmly. The mantra settled over him like a shield. Meanwhile, Kai lay on his bed, flipping through his sketchbook one last time before sleep. The images reminded him of every voice that had risen quietly, every small act that had shifted the balance. He wondered about Florence and Jasmine, about Captain Mercer. He hoped they, too, felt the weight of what had changed that day. The next morning, The brothers met again with Carla and a small team of advocates. Plans were forming for community outreach, educational workshops, and meetings with airline executives. The goal was clear: to turn the moment into a movement. Carla spoke passionately about systemic change and the need to address unconscious bias at every level, from corporate policies to individual actions. Ethan listened, absorbing the strategies and possibilities. He felt a new sense of purpose, a drive to use their experience as a catalyst for wider transformation. Kai, sketchbook in hand, added his voice to the discussion. People need to see this, not just hear it, but feel it. Stories matter. As they left the meeting, Ethan caught Kai's eye. You're right. Stories do matter, and we have one worth telling. Days turned into weeks, and the Nakamura brothers became quiet figures of inspiration in their community. Interviews, speeches, and public appearances filled their schedule. Through it all, they maintained the calm dignity that had defined their journey. Back on the airline, changes began to take shape. Training programs were updated, new protocols introduced, and a culture of accountability encouraged. It was a slow process, with setbacks and resistance, but the ripple effect was undeniable. One afternoon, Ethan received a message from Florence. She thanked him and Kai again, expressing her commitment to do better and her hope that their story would inspire others. Ethan replied with gratitude and encouragement, recognizing that true change often began with empathy and understanding. As Flight 742 continued to travel the skies, its story traveled far beyond the airport gates. It became a symbol of quiet strength and the power of standing up with grace and conviction. Ethan and Kai knew their journey was far from over, but as they looked ahead, they carried with them the unwavering belief that dignity, once claimed, could never be taken away. And in every seat they took, in every place they stood, that belief shone like a beacon, a quiet but unbreakable light in the face of injustice. The sun rose slowly over the city skyline, casting a soft golden light through the curtains of Ethan's apartment. The brothers sat together at the small kitchen table, the morning ritual of coffee and quiet conversation unfolding around them. The world outside moved with its usual haste, but inside, a calm focus had settled. Ethan stirred his coffee slowly, eyes distant but steady. You know, Kai, he began, our story is bigger than just that flight. It's about every person who has ever been told they don't belong, every quiet injustice that gets swept under the rug. Kai nodded, tracing the rim of his mug with a fingertip. Sometimes it feels overwhelming, like, how do we change something so big? Ethan smiled gently. Change always starts small. One seat, one voice, one moment at a time. That morning, news outlets continued to spotlight Flight 742. The brothers watched clips of interviews, read articles, and listened to podcasts where their story was dissected and debated. The public response was powerful. Many shared stories of their own encounters with subtle discrimination, while some pushed back, unwilling to confront uncomfortable truths. Ethan felt the weight of the spotlight, but stayed grounded in his father's lessons. Stand tall, speak up calmly. Later that day, Ethan and Kai met with a group of community leaders, activists, and airline representatives at a local civic center. The room hummed with anticipation and a mix of tension and hope. Carla Simmons, their legal advisor, opened the meeting with a clear call to action. We have a unique opportunity here to not just address policy, but to transform culture. It's time to listen deeply, to act boldly, and to ensure dignity is more than just a word. One airline executive, Michael Reynolds, spoke next. He was a man in his 50s with sharp features and a measured tone. "We acknowledge the mistakes made on Flight 742 and are committed to change. But change requires partnership. We need your input to make meaningful reforms." Kai raised his hand, voice steady despite the weight of the moment. "It's not just about policies on paper. It's about how people feel in those seats. Inclusion means more than tolerance. It means respect." A community organizer named Rosa Martinez added, "We need training that goes beyond compliance. People need to understand bias and privilege, to recognize it in themselves and others." Ethan leaned forward, sharing stories from their flight, how Florence's hesitations, Jasmine's quiet support, and Captain Mercer's firm stand made a difference. It's about humanizing every passenger. Every person deserves to be seen and heard. The meeting stretched into the afternoon, ideas flowing, concerns voiced, and tentative commitments made. It was messy and imperfect, but it was progress. That evening, Ethan and Kai sat on the balcony overlooking the city lights. The air was cool, the sounds of the urban night a distant murmur. Kai broke the silence. "Do you think Florence and Jasmine will really change?" After everything, Ethan looked at his brother, the deep care in his eyes. "I believe people can grow when they're willing to see themselves through the eyes of others." Florence admitted her past pain. Jasmine showed empathy. "They're not perfect, but they are trying, and that counts." Kai exhaled, a mix of hope and uncertainty swirling in his chest. "It's hard sometimes. Believing change is possible." Ethan nodded. "It's the hardest part, but it's also the most important." Days later, Ethan received a message from Captain Mercer. He expressed gratitude for the brothers' courage and shared updates on the airline's new initiatives. Staff training programs were being revamped, and a dedicated hotline had been established for passengers to report discrimination safely. Ethan forwarded the message to Kai, who read it aloud with a smile. "See, the ripples are spreading." In school, Kai found himself sharing his experience with friends and teachers. Some were surprised, others inspired. He realized the power of storytelling to open hearts and minds. Meanwhile, Ethan continued to balance his role as protector and advocate. The legal inquiries and public attention were challenging, but he remained focused on the core principle: dignity. One afternoon, as Ethan walked through a neighborhood park, he spotted a group of young people gathered around a mural. The artwork depicted hands reaching out, intertwined in unity and strength. A young woman approached him, recognizing him from the interviews. "Your story gave me courage," she said softly. "I'm standing up for myself now." Ethan felt a surge of warmth. That's what matters most. Back at home, the brothers spent evenings discussing their hopes for the future. They talked about mentoring programs, education, and the importance of continuing to challenge injustice in all its forms. Kai added a new drawing to his sketchbook, a powerful image of diverse hands holding up a soaring bird, symbolizing freedom and solidarity. Ethan watched his brother, pride swelling in his chest. "You're making your own kind of change." Kai looked up, eyes shining. "We all are." The story of Flight 742 had become a symbol, a beacon for those seeking respect and fairness in everyday life. But for Ethan and Kai, it was more than that. It was a reminder that true strength comes not from force, but from quiet conviction and unwavering dignity. As the city lights flickered below, the brothers knew the journey ahead was long and winding, but they also knew they would walk it together, standing tall, speaking calmly, and holding fast to the belief that justice begins with each of us. The morning light poured gently through the windows of the Nakamura family home in Portland. Ethan sat at the breakfast table, a cup of coffee warm in his hands, while Kai flipped through his sketchbook, now filled with images of their flight and the people they had met. The weight of the past few days settled in his chest. Though the flight had ended, the journey for justice was far from over. "Do you think things will really change?" Kai asked quietly. Eyes fixed on a sketch of Florence's thoughtful face, Ethan took a slow sip and met his brother's gaze. "Change takes time, Kai, sometimes longer than we want, but every step we take matters." Their mother, Anne, placed a plate of pancakes on the table, her smile gentle but tired. "You boys have been through a lot. Remember to take care of yourselves, too." Kai nodded, but the furrow between his brows showed the restless questions inside him. "It's just hard. After everything. I still wonder if the world really sees us, or if this was just a lucky moment." Ethan reached across the table, squeezing Kai's hand. "They see you because you stood your ground, because you showed them who you really are. That's powerful." Later that day, Ethan joined a virtual meeting with civil rights groups and airline representatives. The conversation was tense at times. Some voices called for radical change while others urged caution and gradual reform. Ethan listened carefully, choosing his words with care. "We need policies that protect passengers' dignity, but also a culture shift that starts with every employee." He said, "Training has to go beyond rules. It has to touch hearts." He remembered the fear and frustration on Kai's face during the flight, the endless requests to move, the tight grip on his sketchbook, the way he looked to Ethan for strength. Those moments fueled his resolve. Meanwhile, Kai was preparing for his final exams, his mind torn between schoolwork and the lingering emotions from the flight. His art teacher, Ms. Green, had encouraged him to submit his drawings from the trip to a youth art competition focused on social justice. "It's your story, Kai," she said. "Your voice matters, at home." The brothers found solace in their routines but could not escape the public attention. Reporters called, social media buzzed, and strangers approached them in the park. Some to offer thanks, others with questions. One afternoon, as they walked home from school, a man stopped them. "I saw what you did on the news," he said, his voice low but sincere. "You gave me hope. I've been dealing with discrimination for years. It's time to speak up." Kai smiled shyly. "Thank you, but not all encounters were kind." At the grocery store, Ethan noticed a group of teenagers whispering and staring. A woman glanced away quickly when their eyes met. The undercurrent of bias was still there, subtle but persistent. Ethan's mind raced. How do we fight a system that hides behind polite smiles and unspoken rules? How do we make sure our voices are not just heard but acted upon? That evening, Ethan sat on the balcony, the city lights twinkling below. His phone buzzed with a message from Captain Mercer. The airline was rolling out a new passenger advocacy program. Staff would be trained in cultural sensitivity and conflict resolution. A hotline for reporting discrimination was being launched. It was a step forward, but Ethan felt the weight of responsibility grow heavier. Change was a marathon, not a sprint. Inside, Kai was finishing a new drawing. It showed two figures standing firm beneath a glowing cabin light, surrounded by shadows retreating into the distance. It was a powerful image of resilience. "Hey," Ethan said, "coming inside. That's amazing." Kai looked up, eyes bright. "It's for the future, for everyone who still has to fight." Ethan nodded. We keep walking forward, brother, together. In the days that followed, Ethan and Kai spoke at schools and community centers. They shared their story not as victims, but as catalysts for change. Their message was simple, but profound dignity is not negotiable. At one event, a young girl asked Kai, "What gave you the courage to stand up?" Kai thought for a moment, knowing I wasn't alone, that my brother had my back, and that some things are worth fighting for, even if it's scary. Ethan added, and that sometimes the quietest voices can move the loudest mountains. But with progress came backlash. Some airline staff members resisted the new training, grumbling about added responsibilities. Social media trolls questioned the brothers' motives. Ethan faced moments of doubt. Late one night, alone with his thoughts, Ethan wrestled with a familiar question: was the cost worth it? The public scrutiny, the constant pressure, the fear of retaliation. He recalled his father's words: "Stand tall, speak up calmly." That mantra became his anchor, the belief that integrity and dignity would light the way through the darkness. Meanwhile, Kai struggled with his own battles. The spotlight brought admiration, but also envy and exclusion. Some classmates whispered. Some avoided him. The burden of representation weighed heavily. One afternoon, Kai confided in Ethan, "I want to be strong like you, but sometimes I feel like I'm drowning." Ethan pulled him close. "It's okay to feel scared. Courage isn't about never being afraid. It's about moving forward even when you are." Kai nodded, a flicker of relief in his eyes. As autumn deepened, the Nakamura family gathered for a weekend retreat. They sat around a crackling fire, sharing stories and dreams. The bonds of family offered comfort and strength. Ethan looked at Kai, seeing not just his brother, but a young man growing into his own power. Their journey was far from over, but together they carried a hope that outshone any darkness. As the stars blinked overhead, Ethan whispered a promise: "We will keep standing, we will keep speaking, and we will never let go of our dignity." The crisp autumn air settled over Portland as Ethan and Kai stepped out of their family home. The city was alive with change, yet beneath its vibrant pulse lay a lingering tension. For the Nakamura brothers, the fight for dignity had become more than a single flight or moment. It was now a life they were learning to navigate every day. Kai carried his sketchbook close, the pages filled with images of courage, challenge, and hope. Art had become his voice, a way to process the swirl of emotions inside him. But with every drawing he shared, he felt the weight of expectation grow heavier. "Sometimes I wonder if I'm enough," Kai admitted one afternoon as they walked through a bustling park. The sunlight filtered through turning leaves, casting shadows on the path. "If my drawings, my words, can really make a difference." Ethan glanced at his brother, sensing the struggle beneath those quiet words. "You're more than enough." "Kai, remember, change isn't about one person. It's about all of us walking forward together." Kai nodded, but his eyes held a flicker of doubt. "I just don't want to let anyone down. Not you, not Dad, not anyone who believes in us." Ethan stopped and placed a hand on Kai's shoulder. "You won't. We all have days like this. Even Dad does. The important thing is to keep moving, to keep speaking your truth." Later that week, Ethan found himself at a meeting with Skyline Airways executives and civil rights leaders. The air was thick with urgency and guarded optimism. The airline was unveiling new measures to address systemic discrimination. including revamped training programs and a dedicated oversight committee. Ethan spoke with measured passion. This is a pivotal moment. The policies we set here won't just affect flights, they will shape how people experience dignity and respect every day. We must hold ourselves accountable. A senior executive nodded. We are committed to transparency and reform, but we need partners like you to help us stay on course. The conversation reminded Ethan of the delicate balance between hope and reality. Change required vigilance, resilience, and often sacrifice. Meanwhile, Kai faced his own challenges at school. His classmates admired his talent, but some whispered behind his back, questioning his sudden prominence. The spotlight that once felt empowering sometimes felt isolating. One afternoon, Kai sat alone in the art room, tracing lines on a fresh page. His teacher, Ms. Green, approached quietly. Kai, your art is powerful, but remember, your worth isn't tied to anyone else's approval. You create because your voice matters. Kai looked up, gratitude shining through his fatigue. It's just hard to stay strong all the time. Miss Green smiled softly. Strength isn't about never feeling weak. It's about embracing those moments and finding your way back. That evening, the brothers gathered around the kitchen table, the hum of quiet conversation filling the room. Their parents, Anne and Judge Nakamura, exchanged proud but concerned glances. Being in the public eye is never easy, Anne said gently. But you both have hearts bigger than this moment. Remember who you are when the noise fades. Judge Nakamura leaned forward, his voice steady. I've seen many battles from the bench, but the one you're fighting is different. It's personal. It's about redefining respect in a world that too often forgets its meaning. Ethan listened, feeling the weight of his father's words settle deep inside him. We won't let this story be just about us. He said, it's about every person who's been made to feel small. Kai added quietly, and every person who's had the courage to stand. The days that followed brought a flurry of activity. Ethan participated in panels, media interviews, and community forums. He spoke with clarity and calm, sharing their journey with a candor that inspired and challenged. Kai found new outlets for his creativity, collaborating with local artists and activists to create murals and exhibits. His art began to weave stories of resilience, empathy, and justice throughout the city. But the pressure was relentless. One evening, as the brothers sat watching the sunset from a rooftop, Kai confessed, sometimes I'm scared the world will forget, that this will all fade away. Ethan wrapped an arm around his brother's shoulders. It won't, because we keep showing up, because we carry it with us in everything we do. Their bond, tested and strengthened by adversity, became their refuge and their power. In the weeks ahead, Skyline Airways rolled out its new Ethics Oversight Committee. With Judge Nakamura serving as an advisor, the airline pledged ongoing transparency and accountability. Signaling a shift in corporate culture, Captain Mercer sent Ethan a private message, expressing gratitude for their role in catalyzing change. Your courage sparked a movement. Keep pushing. We're with you. Florence and Jasmine, once distant figures in the story, became symbols of transformation. Florence's story of past prejudice and newfound empathy resonated widely, reminding everyone that growth often comes from difficult truths, yet not all battles were visible. Ethan grappled with the subtle currents of doubt and fatigue. Some nights, he lay awake questioning whether the sacrifices were worth it, the constant scrutiny, the invasive questions, The delicate dance of leadership weighed heavily. One quiet morning, he sat with his father in the library. "Dad, how do you keep going when the world feels so heavy?" Judge Nakamura smiled gently. "Because I believe in the power of justice, Ethan, not the abstract idea, but the lived reality. Every voice raised, every wrong challenged, builds a better world." Ethan took a deep breath, drawing strength from his father's calm presence. "I want to be that beacon for Kai, for all of us. You already are," his father said. "Sometimes the brightest lights come from the quietest places." Kai, meanwhile, continued to pour his soul into his art. One night, he unveiled a new piece to Ethan, two brothers standing strong beneath a canopy of stars, their shadows casting long but unbroken. "It's us," Kai said softly, "but it's also everyone who keeps fighting." Ethan nodded, eyes misting, a testament to resilience. As winter approached, the Nakamura family prepared for a community celebration honoring those who stood for justice and dignity. The event was a tapestry of stories, music, art, and shared hope. Ethan took the stage, voice steady and warm. "This journey has taught us that standing tall is not always easy. Speaking up calmly requires courage, but protecting our dignity is a birthright. Together, we build a future where respect is the rule, not the exception." Kai's art was displayed prominently, a visual anthem of their fight. The crowd erupted in applause, their voices weaving a chorus of commitment and change. Backstage, Florence approached the brothers, her eyes shining with gratitude. "Thank you for reminding me why this work matters, for showing me the power of empathy." Jasmine smiled, her presence a quiet promise of ongoing allyship. Ethan and Kai shared a look, a silent vow to carry this flame forward, no matter the storms ahead. As they stepped into the night, the city lights shimmered like stars, a reminder that even in darkness, hope glows fiercely. The morning sun broke softly through the clouds as Flight 152 prepared for takeoff from Portland International Airport. Inside the cabin, a quiet calm settled among the passengers. The air held a sense of new beginnings, though beneath it lay the echoes of battles fought and promises made. Ethan sat beside Kai, watching his younger brother fidget with the strap of his backpack. The journey ahead was more than just a flight. It was a symbol of the path they had carved through resistance and hope. "Are you ready?" Ethan asked, his voice gentle. Kai nodded, eyes shining with a mix of nerves and excitement. "Ready as I'll ever be." Their parents, Anne and Judge Robert Nakamura, settled across the aisle. Anne gave a reassuring smile, while Judge Nakamura's steady presence offered an unspoken strength. As the plane taxied down the runway, Ethan reflected on the months since that fateful flight when everything changed. The confrontation with Captain Mercer, the calls that grounded the plane, the uproar that followed it had all been a catalyst for something far bigger than themselves. Today's flight was different. Skyline Airways had taken major steps toward reform. New policies were in place, and training programs emphasized respect and inclusion. Still, the true test was in the lived experience of every passenger, every crew member, every interaction. The captain's voice came over the intercom, calm and steady. "Good morning, everyone. This is Captain Mercer speaking. We're cleared for takeoff and look forward to a smooth flight to Seattle." As the engines hummed and the plane lifted into the sky, Ethan felt a quiet satisfaction. Change did not come easily or without scars, but it was real, and it was ongoing. The cabin crew moved with practiced grace, Among them was Jasmine, who had become an outspoken advocate within the airline for fairness and dignity. She caught Ethan's eye and gave a slight nod, a small gesture that spoke volumes. Kai pulled out his sketchbook and began to draw the clouds drifting beneath the plane. Each line was a reminder of the journey they had taken from fear to courage, from silence to voice, midway through the flight. Ethan received a message on his phone. It was from a community organizer in Seattle, inviting him to speak at a forum on racial justice and corporate accountability. The invitation felt like another step forward, a chance to amplify the lessons learned. He shared the news with Kai, who smiled brightly. "See, our story keeps growing." Ethan's thoughts drifted to the countless others whose voices had been silenced. The young black teens moved from first-class seats, the families whose dignity was questioned, the quiet heroes who stood firm in the face of bias. He felt the responsibility keenly, not just as a brother or son, but as a man shaped by history and hope. He knew the journey ahead would demand resilience, patience, and unwavering faith in justice. Kai looked up from his drawing, eyes thoughtful. "Do you ever worry it won't be enough?" Ethan met his gaze. "Sometimes, but I also know that every small act of courage builds into something greater. We're part of a long story, one that stretches back and will continue forward." The plane began its descent into Seattle. The city skyline emerged through the window, a patchwork of glass and green, old neighborhoods and new hopes. As the wheels touched down, Ethan felt a surge of gratitude for his family, for their journey, for the power of standing firm with calm strength. They gathered their belongings, stepping into the terminal with purpose and quiet confidence. Reporters and community members awaited, ready to listen and share the message. Ethan took a deep breath, ready to speak for those who could not, Kai by his side. He stepped into the light of new beginnings. This was more than a flight. It was a movement grounded in dignity, respect, and the unyielding belief that justice can take flight. As Flight 152 touched down, Ethan and Kai's story reminded us all that dignity is not negotiable. It is a right. Their calm strength and courage exposed the quiet prejudice that still lingers in places we least expect. This story is a powerful call to recognize and reject discrimination whenever and wherever it appears. We honor the bravery of those who stand up, not just for themselves, but for every silent passenger who has ever been told they don't belong. It is a reminder that change begins with empathy, quiet conviction, and the willingness to speak truth calmly. If this story moved you, if it inspired you to reflect or stand a little taller, please like this video, share it with friends and family, and subscribe to our channel. Together, we can keep these important conversations alive and inspire real change. Stay tuned for more stories that touch the heart and challenge the mind, because every voice matters, and every story counts.